There's a level of mental strength that makes people uncomfortable just being around you. A presence so unshakable that others can't understand how you remain calm when everything around you is chaos. And today, you'll discover exactly how to build it. Through the life of a man who faced over 60 life-or-death duels and never lost once. Have you ever seen someone who remains absolutely still while everyone else panics? Who makes decisions with crystal clarity while others freeze? That's not a genetic gift. That's not luck. That's a specific type of mental architecture, built through a system so demanding that most people quit before they even understand what's being asked of them. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. Born in 1584, he would become the greatest swordsman Japan ever produced. But here's what nobody tells you. His undefeated record wasn't about physical skill. It was about a mind so disciplined, so ruthlessly trained, that fear couldn't find a place to take root. They call it heijoshin, the practice of maintaining an unmovable mind, the state where external chaos creates zero internal disturbance. But there's a catch. This system isn't for everyone, because building this level of mental strength requires you to die repeatedly. To face the thing that terrifies you most, over and over, until your nervous system literally rewires itself to stop recognizing it as a threat. But before I show you exactly how this system works, I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel. Second, hit that like button. And third, comment below with one word, unbreakable. This helps me a lot and shows me that you're genuinely interested in building the kind of mental strength that changes everything. Let's go. Chapter 1. The boy who chose violence. Meet Marcus, 29 years old, marketing manager. Every morning he wakes up with anxiety already crawling up his spine. A difficult conversation at work makes his heart race. An unexpected bill triggers a spiral of catastrophic thinking. His girlfriend tells him he's too sensitive, and he hates that she's right. He's tried everything. Meditation apps that promise calm in 10 minutes. Breathing techniques that work until the real pressure hits. Positive affirmations that feel like lies the moment he says them. Monday morning, he's motivated. Wednesday afternoon, he's negotiating with himself. Friday evening, he's exactly where he started, wondering why everyone else seems to handle stress better than he does. The pattern repeats weekly. He'll read about someone who overcame anxiety, feel inspired, try their method, get results for maybe 3 days, then watch it all collapse the moment real life applies real pressure. Sound familiar? Here's what Marcus didn't understand. Mental strength isn't built in comfort. It's not developed through apps or affirmations or anything that lets you stay safe. It's forged in the exact situations that terrify you most, and it requires a level of commitment that most people call crazy. Until the day he discovered the story of a 13-year-old boy named Musashi. The year was 1597. Musashi's father had just died. His uncle, a monk, could have taken him to the temple, given him safety, education, a normal life. But Musashi made a different choice. He walked into the local dojo and challenged the master to a duel, not for honor, not for reputation, because he understood something that took Marcus 29 years to figure out. You don't build mental strength by avoiding fear. You build it by walking directly into it repeatedly, until your nervous system stops treating it as an emergency. That first duel? Musashi was fighting a man twice his age with decades of training. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear. Everything in his biology was screaming at him to run, and he stayed. He lost that duel. Badly. But something happened in that defeat. Something his brain had never experienced before. He survived the thing he feared most. The catastrophe his nervous system predicted never came. And the next morning, he challenged someone else. Chapter 2. The 60 Duel Protocol. This is where it gets interesting. Between age 13 and 29, Musashi fought 60 duels. These weren't friendly sparring matches. These were shinken shobu, real sword duels where death was not just possible but expected. A Harvard University neuroscientist who has been studying fear extinction for 15 years explains it like this. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, creates predictions about threat. When you avoid the feared situation, you confirm the prediction. The fear grows stronger. But when you face the situation and survive, you create what's called a prediction error. Your brain has to update its model of reality. Musashi didn't do this once. He did it 60 times. Each duel rewired his nervous system a little more. The first 10 duels, his hands shook. The next 20, the shaking lessened. By duel 40, his heart rate barely elevated. By duel 60, he could stand across from an opponent trying to kill him, and his breath would remain absolutely steady. This is the system they called Tamashi no Kitai, the forging of the spirit, not metaphorically, literally. The same way a blacksmith heats metal, hammers it, heats it again, hammers it again, until the molecular structure changes and the metal becomes something it wasn't before. Marcus read this, and his first thought was exactly what yours probably is right now. That's extreme. I don't need to fight duels. I just need to handle a difficult conversation without my hands shaking. But here's the principle Musashi discovered that changes everything. The nervous system doesn't differentiate between types of threats. It only measures intensity and repetition. When you train it to stay calm under maximum pressure, moderate pressure becomes effortless. So Marcus created his own version. Every single day, he forced himself into the conversation he'd been avoiding, the difficult feedback to his team, the boundary setting with his boss, the honest conversation with his girlfriend about needs he'd been suppressing. Day 3, his voice was shaking. Day 7, his heart was still racing, but his voice was steady. Day 14, he noticed his heart rate barely increased. Day 40, he walked into the CEO's office to disagree with a decision, and his hands were completely still. His girlfriend asked him what changed. "You're different. You used to get anxious about everything. Now nothing seems to bother you." He smiled. Because he'd figured out what Musashi knew. You don't become mentally strong by protecting yourself from stress. You become mentally strong by repeatedly exposing yourself to it until your biology stops treating it as a crisis. But here's where most people misunderstand the system. Chapter 3. The isolation that builds invincibility. Musashi didn't just fight duels. Between age 30 and 50, he spent extended periods in complete isolation. Months alone in mountain caves. No human contact, no entertainment, no distraction. Just him, his thoughts, and the absolute silence that most modern people would call torture. They called this practice Ango, the intensive training period. Zen monks still do this. 3 months of sitting with nothing but your own mind, watching every uncomfortable thought, every urge to escape, every negotiation your ego tries to make, and staying anyway. A neuroscientist from MIT who has been studying meditation and mental resilience for 12 years discovered something fascinating. Extended periods of unstimulated attention literally change your brain's default mode network. The constant narrative your mind tells itself, the endless commentary and judgment and prediction, it begins to quiet. Not because you're suppressing it, because you've trained your attention to rest in direct experience instead of mental storytelling. Most people can't sit with themselves for 5 minutes without reaching for their phone. Musashi sat for months. And what he discovered in that silence is what gives truly mentally strong people their unshakable quality. The thing you're resisting isn't external circumstances, it's the discomfort of being with yourself. Marcus tested this principle next. Every morning, before checking his phone, before coffee, before anything, he sat for 30 minutes with zero stimulation. No meditation app, no guided practice, no music, just sitting with whatever arose. Week 1 was hell. Every cell in his body screamed for distraction. His mind produced an endless stream of urgent tasks, brilliant ideas, important memories, anything to get him to move. The discomfort was so intense he wanted to quit every single day. But he'd learned from Musashi, the discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. The discomfort is the practice. You're training your nervous system to tolerate the intolerable. You're teaching your attention that it doesn't have to chase every mental movement. Week 3, something shifted. The thoughts were still there, but they had less grip. He could watch anxiety arise, peak, and dissolve without needing to fix it. Week 6, he realized he was going through his entire day with a kind of inner quiet he'd never experienced before. His colleagues started noticing. "How are you so calm all the time? Don't you feel the pressure?" He did feel it, But it wasn't moving him anymore because he'd spent hours learning to sit with discomfort so intense that work stress registered as mild by comparison. This is the principle Musashi wrote about in his final text, the Book of Five Rings. You must train day and night to make the mind like a mirror, reflecting all things without disturbance. Not positive thinking, not reframing. Pure, unwavering attention that doesn't get pulled into the drama of the mind. But here the real problem began. Chapter 4. The Death Meditation Protocol. Year 1640. Musashi is 56 years old. He's survived 60 duels, countless battles, decades of isolation. But he adds one final practice that his students found disturbing. Every single night before sleep, he performed Shi no Kankyo, the meditation on death. Here's how it worked. He would lie down exactly as if he were dying. Slow his breath. Feel his body going cold. Imagine each organ shutting down, his heart stopping, his consciousness fading, complete death, every night, for the rest of his life. Why would someone do this? A Yale behavioral psychologist who has been studying mortality awareness for 20 years explains that most anxiety comes from unconscious death fear. Every time you worry about money, it's death. Every time you fear rejection, it's death. Every time you panic about failure, underneath it all is the primitive terror of not surviving. When you consciously, repeatedly face your actual death, everything else becomes less threatening. Not because you become nihilistic, because your threat assessment system recalibrates. The argument with your boss isn't a survival threat. The difficult conversation isn't life or death. Your nervous system finally knows the difference. Marcus implemented this immediately. Every night, 5 minutes before sleep, he would close his eyes and systematically imagine his death, his breath slowing, his heartbeat stopping, his consciousness fading to nothing, the complete cessation of his existence, the first weak panic attacks. His body fought it violently, every survival instinct screamed, but he stayed with it. Week 2, the panic lessened. Week 4, he could go through the entire meditation without terror. Week 8, something extraordinary happened. He was in a meeting where his biggest proposal was getting destroyed. Normally, this would send him into a spiral. His career, his reputation, his financial security, all threatened. But in that moment, sitting across from executives tearing his work apart, he felt completely calm. Not because he didn't care. Because some part of his mind, trained through months of death meditation, recognized this wasn't actually death. His threat response simply didn't activate. He could think clearly, respond strategically, feel disappointed without being destabilized. His friend asked him later, "How did you stay so calm in there?" Marcus didn't tell him about the death meditation. People don't understand that kind of practice. They think it's morbid, depressing, unhealthy, but Musashi knew, the samurai knew. When you've faced your own death consciously 1,000 times, life's smaller threats lose their power to move you. This is what Musashi meant when he wrote, "The way of the warrior is death. If you can face death calmly, you can accomplish anything." But Marcus still had one final layer to penetrate. Chapter 5. The One Thing Test. Musashi spent the final 3 years of his life in complete isolation in a cave called Reigando. Not because he was hiding, because he was writing. His final text, the Book of Five Rings, the summation of everything he'd learned about combat, strategy, and the human mind. But before he began writing, he performed one final test. He asked himself, if I could only practice one technique for the rest of my life, which would make me unbeatable? Not 10 techniques, not 5, 1. The entire martial arts world expected him to name some complex sword technique, some secret strategy. Instead, he wrote about Heijoshin, the immovable mind, the state where your attention is fully present, undistracted by past or future, unshaken by external circumstances. He wrote, "You can learn 10,000 techniques, but if your mind moves when struck, you will be defeated. Train the mind to be like still water, reflecting everything, disturbed by nothing." Marcus had built resilience through exposure. He'd built attention through isolation. He'd reframed threat through death meditation, but he was still missing something. His mental strength was reactive, strong when tested. But Musashi's system pointed to something proactive. A neuroscientist from Stanford, who has been studying attention and consciousness for 15 years, discovered that most people exist in a state of continuous partial attention. Your mind is never fully where you are, always splitting between the current moment and the mental narrative about it, always dividing between what's happening and your judgment of what's happening. This creates a fundamental weakness. When pressure hits, your already divided attention fragments further. You can't think clearly because your attention isn't consolidated in the first place. But when attention is unified, fully present, not split between experience and commentary, you become unbreakable. Musashi trained this through Ichigyo Zamai, the practice of single-pointed concentration. Whatever he did completely. When he ate, he only ate. When he walked, he only walked. When he fought, he only fought. No mental commentary, no distraction, no split attention, just pure, unified presence. Marcus created his version. Every single activity throughout his day, he practiced doing only that thing. Brushing teeth, only brushing teeth, not planning his day, not reviewing yesterday, just the sensation of bristles, the taste of toothpaste, the movement of his hand. Eating breakfast, only eating, not checking phone, not reading news, not thinking about the meeting ahead, just texture, temperature, taste. Walking to his car, only walking, not lost in thought, not rehearsing conversations. Just the feeling of legs moving, air on skin, sounds around him. The first week felt impossible. His mind rebelled against the simplicity. It wanted to multitask, to be productive, to fill every moment with mental activity. But he stayed with it. One activity, full attention, nothing else. Week 3, he noticed something remarkable. When crisis hit at work, a project failure that would normally send him spiraling, he responded instantly and effectively. Not because he'd planned for it, because his attention wasn't fragmented. He was fully present, so his full intelligence was available. His girlfriend noticed the biggest change. You actually listen now. Like really listen. It's like you're completely here. She was right. Before he was physically present but mentally elsewhere. Now when he was with her, he was only with her. No phone, no distractions, no mental planning, just complete attention. This is the practice that creates the quality people call presence, not charisma, not confidence tricks, not manipulation. Just a mind so unified, so completely where it is, that others feel the difference instinctively. Chapter 6. The 30-Day Crucible. On day 60 of Marcus's training, something unexpected happened. Everything that had been working stopped working. The exposure that built resilience, he'd adapted. The isolation that built attention. Routine now. The death meditation. No longer challenging. His nervous system had adjusted to everything he'd thrown at it. This is where most people quit. They build some resilience, feel better, then plateau, and because they don't know what Musashi knew, they think they've reached their limit. They settle for partial transformation, better than before but still fundamentally movable when real pressure hits. Musashi faced this same plateau multiple times. His solution? Musha Shugyo, the warrior pilgrimage. A 30-day period where you intentionally create maximum discomfort, not random discomfort, strategic discomfort designed to force the next evolution of your nervous system. Here's how it works. You identify your remaining weakness, the thing that still moves you, still creates disturbance. Then you design 30 consecutive days of deliberate exposure to exactly that thing. No breaks. No negotiations. No lighter versions. Full intensity every day for 30 days. A neuroscientist from Johns Hopkins, who has been studying neuroplasticity and habit formation for 12 years, explains that your brain changes most rapidly under sustained, consistent pressure. Not occasional pressure, not random challenges, sustained, daily, unavoidable confrontation with the exact thing your nervous system wants to avoid. Marcus identified his remaining weakness, public visibility. He could handle stress, he could maintain attention, he could face his own death, but the thought of being truly seen, of sharing his real thoughts publicly, where they could be judged, criticized, rejected, that still moved him. So he created his 30-day crucible. Every single day for 30 days, he would post a video sharing his actual opinions on topics he cared about. No hiding behind professionalism, no safe topics, real thoughts, real positions, real vulnerability. Day 1, his hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the camera. Day 3, he almost quit. The exposure felt unbearable. Day 7, someone left a comment tearing his ideas apart. Every cell in his body wanted to delete everything and hide. Day 14, the urge to quit was so strong he sat at his computer for an hour before he could press record. But he didn't quit. Day 21, something shifted. The fear was still there, but it wasn't controlling him. Day 25, he posted his most vulnerable video yet and barely felt anxious. Day 30, he realized the thought of being seen publicly no longer created internal disturbance. His nervous system had adapted, not because the threat wasn't real. Public criticism is real, rejection is real. But his biology had learned through 30 days of sustained exposure that being seen wasn't a survival threat. The prediction error was complete. This is what Musashi meant when he wrote, "Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Not victory over others. Victory over the version of you that still lets fear make decisions. The version that negotiates, that finds easier paths, that settles for partial transformation." But Marcus discovered one final principle that brought everything together. Chapter 7. The Social Proof of Transformation. Week 14, Marcus was having coffee with an old friend. His friend was venting about stress at work, anxiety about a presentation, fear about a difficult conversation ahead. All the things Marcus used to relate to completely. But as he listened, he realized he couldn't relate anymore. Not because he was judging, because those situations literally didn't create stress responses in his body anymore. The mechanisms his friend was describing, the racing heart, the catastrophic thinking, the urge to avoid, his nervous system didn't do those things anymore. His friend noticed. "What's different about you? You seem so calm all the time. It's actually kind of weird." Marcus smiled, because he'd arrived at something Musashi wrote about, but he'd never understood. When your discipline becomes absolute, when your mental strength becomes unshakable, other people will find it disturbing. Not inspiring, disturbing, because you're operating at a level that makes their excuses visible to them. A few weeks later, at a team meeting, someone said, "Your consistency is scary. You never seem off. You never have bad days." "It's not normal," Marcus's response. Great, because he'd finally understood what the entire system was building toward. Not just resilience, not just attention, not just the ability to handle stress. Complete identity transformation. From someone who is moved by circumstances to someone who is unmoved. From someone who reacts to pressure to someone who simply doesn't have the reaction anymore. This is what separates partial transformation from complete transformation. Most people build enough strength to handle normal stress better. Musashi's system builds strength so complete that what would break others doesn't even register as stress to you. Your baseline has changed. Your nervous system has fundamentally rewired. Marcus's girlfriend brought it up 6 months in. "I don't know how to say this, but you're different. Like fundamentally different. The person I started dating isn't who you are now, and I don't know if I like it." He understood. He'd become someone whose center couldn't be moved by relationship dynamics, by approval or disapproval, by comfort or discomfort. He was kind, he was present, but he wasn't controllable through emotional pressure. And for people used to the old version, that feels threatening. This is the final test Musashi never wrote about, but every serious practitioner discovers. When you build real mental strength, some people in your life won't celebrate it. They'll call it cold. They'll call it obsessive. They'll call it not normal. Because your unshakable quality reveals their shakeable quality. Your discipline highlights their lack of discipline. Your mental stillness contrasts with their mental chaos. And you have to be okay with that. Chapter 8. The Identity Death Day 90. Marcus sat in meditation and had a realization that made him laugh. The anxious, reactive, easily disturbed person he'd been 6 months ago. That person was dead. Not metaphorically, literally. The neural patterns that created that identity had been overwritten. The behaviors that maintained that self had been replaced. The Marcus who started this process no longer existed. In his place was someone new. Someone whose nervous system had been forged through exposure, isolation, death meditation, unified attention, and sustained challenge. Someone who looked the same on the outside, but was fundamentally different on the inside. This is what Musashi meant in his final days when he wrote, "I have survived not because I was the strongest, but because I was willing to die the most times." He wasn't talking about physical death. He was talking about the death of who you were, the death of the comfortable identity, the death of the person who needed safety, approval, certainty, every exposure to fear. A death. Every session of uncomfortable isolation. A death. Every meditation on mortality. A death. Every day of the 30-day crucible. A death. You kill the person who can't handle it, over and over, until what remains is someone who can handle anything. And here's what nobody tells you about this process. It's not empowering in the way motivational content promises. It's not exciting. It's not inspiring while it's happening. It's brutal. It's lonely. It's uncomfortable every single day. The only reward is becoming the kind of person who doesn't need external rewards to stay committed. Marcus's life hadn't become easier. He still faced stress at work. He still had relationship challenges. He still dealt with uncertainty and pressure and all the difficulties that come with being human. But his relationship to those difficulties had completely changed. They happened around him, not to him. They were weather patterns moving through, not threats to his survival. When people asked him for advice now, he didn't know what to say, because the real answer wouldn't help them. The real answer is, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable every day for months. You have to face the exact things you've been avoiding. You have to sit with yourself until you can't stand it and sit longer. You have to imagine your own death until death loses its grip on you. You have to expose yourself to judgment until being seen doesn't move you. Nobody wants to hear that. They want a technique, a shortcut, a way to get the result without the process. But Musashi's system doesn't work that way. The process is the result. The discomfort is the transformation. The difficulty is the point. So Marcus stopped trying to explain. He just lived as someone whose mental strength made others uncomfortable. He just maintained the discipline that people called scary. He just operated from the unshakable center that others found not normal. And when someone occasionally asked, "How do you stay so calm?" he'd smile and say, "Practice." Because the real answer, the complete answer, the truth about what it actually takes, they weren't ready to hear. Musashi spent his final days in that cave, writing his final text, knowing that most people would read it as a manual for sword fighting. But the real teaching was never about swords. It was about the mind. The unshakable, immovable, unflinching mind that remains still while everything around it moves. The mind that has died so many times that death itself no longer holds power. He died on June 13th, 1645, at age 61. His last words were written, not spoken. "I have no regrets." Not because his life was easy, because he'd built a mind so strong that nothing could move it from its center, not fear, not pain, not even death. That's the real path to unshakable mental strength, not positive thinking, not resilience hacks, not motivation, the systematic destruction of the person who breaks under pressure, and the rebirth of the person who doesn't break at all. The death of your reactive self and the birth of your immovable self. The question remains, are you ready for this level of transformation? Because it's not about becoming mentally strong. It's about becoming a completely different person. It's about the death of who you are and the birth of who you could be. It's about building something inside yourself that others will call scary, obsessive, not normal. And when you hear those words, you'll know you've finally gotten where you were meant to be. If you're ready to walk this path, subscribe so you don't miss the next video that will show you the next layer of this transformation. Comment "Unbreakable" below as your commitment to this process. And remember, the consistency that scares others is the only consistency worth having. If you've watched this far, thank you very much for your attention. See you in the next video.